I'm an exchange alumnus.
I'm an exchange alumna.
I'm an exchange alumna.
I'm an exchange alumnus.
I am an exchange alumna.
I'm an exchange alumna.
People, places, and international exchange. Voices of Exchange delivers unforgettable first-person stories from people transformed by international exchange.
I remember learning how to cook.
These exchange alumni share stories of growth, unexpected friendship, and career inspiration from all around the world.
We are
the Voices of Exchange.
You have to convince the men and boys around you to say that this is a problem. Now, they may never have been challenged before. They may never have been spoken to about it before, because a lot of the men, interestingly, say that, oh, we never thought it was a problem.
This week, we travel to Mumbai, India, where we meet Elsa Marie De Silva, the founder of Red Dot Foundation Safe City, a platform that documents sexual harassment and abuse in public spaces. Hear about her journey from the corporate world to award-winning social entrepreneur, the circle of sisterhood, and how she is helping women walk with confidence.
My name is Elsa, and I am an exchange alumni. I was really lucky to have been selected for both these programs, the Fortune State Department Mentoring Program, as well as the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. So I really consider myself lucky. Both of them were, I would say, life-changing, especially the Fortune Mentoring Program, because you are mentored by some of the most successful women in the world. And to be in that circle of sisterhood and, I would say, leadership is really, really reaffirming, not only for yourself as a leader and a social entrepreneur, but also as someone who comes from maybe India to the US. I understand the value of the relationship, and therefore I pay it forward by also mentoring others and facilitating mentoring relationships with established leaders in India with vulnerable girls. It's a gift that you cannot measure in the present moment, but in the future, when you look back, you will know how valuable that gift was. And that's really now, when I look back on my Fortune experience, I really, really know the importance and the value of it. I believe I've always had that passion to positively impact other people and help them explore their potential. But the current work that I do with Red Dot Foundation actually began in December 2012. At the time, I was in the aviation sector. I was heading a department called Network Planning, where I was optimizing over 500 daily flights. And then in the middle of December 2012, we had a horrific incident where a young girl was gang raped on a bus in Delhi and subsequently died of her injuries. And that incident was so brutal and horrific. It opened up a lot of conversations around the topic of sexual and gender-based violence. Now, I was in my bubble in aviation, but this also, got me really upset. And I felt I was at a moment in my life looking for my purpose, but I wanted to contribute in a very concrete manner. And this incident was a catalyst for me launching Safe City. What is Safe City? It's a crowd map or a crowdsourcing tool where we encourage people to report their experiences of sexual and gender-based violence anonymously. And this is then collated as location-based trends visualized on a map as hotspots. And the aim is to make the issue more visible, because until that incident that happened with Jyoti Singh, I don't recall reporting my own experiences of sexual violence. In fact, all my women friends had experienced it, but none of us had made any official complaint, which meant that this issue was invisible due to the lack of data. the official statistics do not reflect the true nature and size of the problem. And what we were trying to do with Safe City is make it more visible by bridging the data gap, putting it in a format that people could understand what was happening where, and also make the data available in the open source format so that you can use it in whatever way you wanted to use it, at the individual level to improve your situational awareness, or engage with your community to find solutions with you, or even to demand accountability from service providers like the police, the municipal corporation, or your administration on college campuses. And it's not very different from the various apps we use in our day-to-day life. You know, we are now in a space in technology where every decision we make is made using peer reviews. We depend on what other people are sharing about their experiences regarding a hotel, a restaurant. So why can't we learn from each other's experiences on sexual and gender-based violence? We can definitely learn from it. We can make ourselves situationally aware so that we respond quicker, faster, better, more effectively. You see, what happens is when a woman is confronted in these circumstances, you tend to freeze, because there are three responses. You can freeze, you can flee, you can fight back. But we freeze, and then we beat ourselves up emotionally saying that was not an adequate response. So if you had advanced intelligence to say, okay, on this street corner, this is what I can expect. Or if I'm taking the train, this route has this kind of a problem, you can have many strategies to respond. And you're aware. Also, the perpetrators looking to catch you when you're not aware, or, you know, they'll prey on the vulnerable, so to speak. But if you knew, you will walk with confidence. At least that's my hope. And you will respond even more confidently, which will intimidate the perpetrator. And then take the community, for example. If you went and told your story, again, the onus comes back to you saying you were in the wrong place, you were wearing the wrong clothing, who told you to go out, etc. But if you can prove that it was happening over and over again in that same location, the pattern is appearing through the data, you can then ask questions of your community as to why they are okay with this kind of behavior, and demand for them to have your back. And that's very powerful. And the solutions that we have seen range from not only policing, but also where do you place the CCTV cameras? Because in my city, everybody loves putting CCTV cameras. So you can have a say how, you know, where those CCTV cameras are placed. But you can also use art on walls to challenge these cultural norms that promote harmful gender stereotypes and so on and so forth. And then institutional accountability. We have seen that you don't need big data. You need relevant, disaggregated data to convince the authorities to implement better policies and procedures. So whether it is increased beat patrolling or change of beat patrol timings, fixing broken lights, fixing broken toilets, all these contribute towards the feeling of being unsafe. So 2012 was a landmark year for me. So the company that I was working with underwent a financial downturn and eventually shut. Of course, as head of network planning, I was working on recovery plans, and we were in talks with another airline to, buy us off, etc. But I thought to myself that if I wanted to make that change, or if I wanted to pay it forward, this was my moment. It was never going to come again. And if it didn't work out, I could always go back to a corporate job. But if I didn't make that decision now, at that time, I didn't think I would have had the courage to make it in the future. Now, I come from aviation, and at one point in my career, I was a safety instructor. So aviation is a very safe industry in the sense there's a lot of investment in situational awareness and emergency preparedness. And you go through all these drills annually, all the time, thinking about all the various situations that could go wrong, right? And we study accidents, and we study in a way. I'm just applying what I learned in aviation to this particular topic. And when I explain this, or when now my team explains this to the partner organizations in the communities that we work in, it makes a lot of sense to them because they know intuitively that this is happening on a daily basis. But without the data, you cannot give it, that touch and feel to it. You have to convince the men and boys around you to say that this is a problem. Now, they may never have been challenged before. They may never have been spoken to about it before, because a lot of the men, interestingly, say that, oh, we never thought it was a problem. Every city has its own dynamic, and knowing what will happen where is very important, because the kind of crime that we are seeing surface on our data and our map in Delhi is very different from Bombay, is very different from Kerala, for example, or Goa. And just knowing what is ahead of you is really important in your own plan of action for your own safety. But basically, there's very poor understanding of the spectrum of abuse, what constitutes sexual violence, what is the legislation. Many men don't even realize, and many women too, that it is a crime. In India, for every category of non-verbal, verbal, physical forms of abuse, it is a crime. So knowing your rights is absolutely critical. And we shouldn't be waiting for something to happen to us to then find out what is the law and what are our rights. And that data is absolutely critical as well, because it allows you to think of innovative options, non-confrontational options. It helps you build dialogue of trust within your community and between your community and institutional service providers. Once we get a sizable amount in any community, 100 reports, 500 reports, we help analyze those reports and present the findings back to the community. And then ask them what do they want to do to solve the issue. One of my favorite examples is in Delhi, in an urban village, low-income community. One of the hotspots was near a tea stall. And if you've been to India, you know the tea stall is a kiosk on the side of the road, which is a male-only space. You'll never find women hanging around over there drinking tea. Now, the way it was located, women and girls had to pass by on their way to school, college, work. And men would loiter over there, stare at them, and intimidate them with their constant male gaze. And when asked what would they like to change, they said, we want the staring and the loitering to stop. Now, how do you challenge this kind of behavior? So we organized an art-based workshop, and on the wall near the tea stall, a huge wall, we painted a mural with staring eyes and subtle messaging that says, look with your heart, not with your eyes. We won't be intimidated by your gaze. We will speak up. We will not stay silent. All of this is through the wall, okay? We call it talking walls now. And this was so effective that the staring actually stopped and the loitering also stopped, because the tea stall owner was now put on notice and he would, send the men away. Now, this wall mural idea was so powerful that we used it in other places. Outside a girls' college in Bombay, we got them to paint their feelings on the wall. And I remember during that time, men would stop to see what we were doing, a bunch of women painting the wall. And these girls decided that in between these panels, they would put the sections of the law that make all of this a crime. And they became advocates to educate their own communities, their peer groups on why they shouldn't indulge in this behavior. So you see the ripple effect where one innovation then goes to another, and you're constantly learning what has worked in some community or the other. I had a lot of organizations reach out, like my friend Jane in Kenya. She saw how we could be useful to her, and that's how we landed up in Kenya. Similarly in Nepal. And, I'm part of Vital Voices, which is another great organization supporting women leaders around the world. And a lot of them work on ending violence against women and girls. So we are their natural partner because we are a tech platform that they can use. And it's a free platform unless there is a modification that needs to be introduced. But as is, it's a global app. It can be used anywhere in the world. And so we tell them, try it out. We have to talk about female leadership because there's just not enough of it. Take, for example, Kamala Harris. When she was elected as vice president, the whole world was celebrating. Why? Why is that? Because we felt we had broken that glass ceiling along with her. If you take India, we have 14% of women in parliament. 14%. That's a miserable amount. If you take business leadership also, it's pathetic. It's nothing like 33%. If you talk about women's formal participation in the labor market, it is falling year on year and it's less than 25%. I don't know post-COVID what it is like because millions of women have lost their jobs. And you take any kind of statistic, women are written out of the equation. We need to make the effort to make women more visible. Men need to make space for them. And I'm tired of this tokenism where people want to tick boxes. There has to be an effort made. They'll never have the experience unless you give them that space. So when I look at my own leadership journey, I've been very fortunate that my male bosses gave me that opportunity to excel. It's not that all women will be great leaders or that they will always do the right thing for gender equality. But at the moment, we do not have as many reference points to say what female leadership does look like. We don't have that problem with men, right? So when one man as a leader fails, we say, okay, he was a bad person. But when one woman leader fails, because we are so few in number, they put the whole onus on the gender, saying, the entire lot of them are bad. If you look at how countries have fared during COVID, by and large, the countries that have done well have mainly had women leaders, or the cities that have done well. So there is a point to be made for female leadership, and we just have to put in more of an effort, and it has to be top-down driven. Ever since I started with Safe City, I do have to say that the US Consulate Mumbai has been one of my biggest supporters. And then I have personally benefited from the 2 State Department exchange programs. I do not feel like that relationship has ever ended. It's a continuous one. It's one for life. And I have used it for the benefit of my organization, but more importantly, for the benefit of my cause, which is advancing gender equality and prevention of sexual and gender-based violence. So I'm deeply grateful and humbled as well for having been selected for these programs. It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I highly recommend it to everyone out there. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful to the US Consulate Mumbai, who have always supported my work, always helped me think through solutions, and seen the potential in what we were doing even before we realized that.
Social entrepreneur, founder, sister, mentor. Thank you, Elsa Marie De Silva, for sharing your story with us. New episodes of Voices of Exchange drop every 2 weeks on all major podcast platforms. So subscribe and don't forget to tell your friends. Hey, tell everybody. And in true Voices of Exchange fashion, as I would have said when stationed abroad in Italy, arrivederci, which means goodbye in Italian. But of course, we'll see you next time.